Still got some juice from my mic. Okay, so we are gonna go over trunking now. So I'm gonna unmute my Zoom call here. I'll get this meeting chat out of the way. We're gonna go over trunking. I'm gonna configure basic trunking, then I'll configure advanced trunking lab. That's what we're gonna go over. And then we'll probably end the stream, the YouTube stream, or maybe I'll go over Ether channel with you guys as well, with the Zoom chat as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so we're gonna go over trunking now. The advanced trunking lab is where you guys are gonna do on your own again, just like we did with VLANs. And I'll go over the basic trunking lab and everything we need to know about trunking. So if you were doing the advanced VLAN lab and you got to the last step, it told you to ping, and you probably couldn't. Maybe you could ping VLAN 10 to VLAN 10 across the switch. Maybe you could ping VLAN 20 to VLAN 20 across the switch. Maybe you couldn't at all. And there's a couple reasons. One, when VLANs need to communicate between switches, that connection between switches has to be configured as a trunk, what we call a trunk. That trunk is a superhighway that allows all VLAN communication across a single port. Another thing you need for inter-VLAN communication is also something like a default gateway, like a routing device, to allow you to route outside that local network in VLAN 10 or VLAN 20, right? So if I want to talk from VLAN 10 to VLAN 20, that's going to be outside of my network. I need a default gateway, i.e. a routing device to be able to route that traffic. That's going to be in section 4. Right now, we're just worried about trunks, and that's purely a layer 2 thing, okay? So we're going to go over trunks, how to configure them. There's two ways, static and through the dynamic trunking protocol. We're going to go over both, okay? So let's draw this out. So we're going to be going over trunking. So let's say I have a switch here connected to a switch over here. This is switch 2, this is switch 1, and they're both connected on gig 00. And on each switch, they have their respective VLANs. VLAN 10, and they have, let's just say, VLAN 20, right? Doesn't really matter. We have VLANs that need to talk to each other. So what do I need to configure between those switches? A trunk. That trunk, again, is that superhighway that allows those VLANs across. Now, there's going to be a trunking standard. Just like there's two standards to tag traffic in VLANs, 802.1q and ISL, same with the trunk, okay? So we have to choose the encapsulation for that trunk as well, all right? Now by default in these newer Cisco Catalyst models, it's always going to be .1q. But for our purposes, for our lab, for the CCNA exam, you need to hard set what type of encapsulation that trunk is going to be trunking for. Meaning what kind of VLAN tagged traffic is it expecting? It's either going to be 802.1q, that's the IEEE multi-vendor standard, or Cisco ISL, inter-switch linking, which is the Cisco proprietary. Again, real world, it's always 802.1q. Just for this CCNA exam objectives, we have to know it's 802.1q and ISL a difference, right? Okay, so trunking. Two different ways to configure this. We have what's called a static trunk. Let me write this in black. A static trunk. That's essentially where we go into each interface and say switch port mode trunk. Here's the configuration. Here's how simple it is. So at the switch, let's say this is switch 1, from global config mode, you literally just, let me zoom in a little bit. You just type in interface gig 00, whatever that interface is, right? That'll bring us to what's called global sub configuration mode. And you just type in switch port trunk encapsulation .1q. Expand this. So this command needs to come first in our environment and for the CCNA exam. Now again, I understand if you've done this real world and you're like, I didn't have to do this. I agree with you. I have on my desk a Catalyst, a 9300, and guess what? I don't have to do that on my 9300 Catalyst switch at all when I'm setting up trunks. But for the CCNA, for our lab environments, you need to, okay? So that's step 1. Set the encapsulation that you're going to use, okay? Next, we have to set the mode. Switch port mode trunk. And guess what? That's it, guys. That is how we configure a static trunk. It is literally that simple. Literally that simple, okay? So there it is. And that's typically what you're gonna see like in any environment you're in, right? Just the static trunks. There is something called the the dynamic trunking protocol, DTP. These DTP messages are sent across via the native VLAN, right? That control plane traffic on a switch. And those can negotiate to create a trunk or to leave it as an access port. We'll get to that. Before I get to that, because that's gonna be something you have to understand for the CCNA exam, like the different modes and what they do, I'm gonna go over something called trunk pruning. So let's say in our environment here. So I'm gonna zoom out a little bit. And let me move this down here. Okay, so let's say our environment, over on switch 2, I have an R&D department, research and development department, hanging off VLAN 500. And then imagine, right, just because I like to be accurate, imagine this switch is connected to the router and then off to the internet, okay, whatever. So let's say we have VLAN 500 over here. That's for research and development. Very closed off network. Very, it's private. It's confidential stuff going over here in the R&D department. And let's say I have all these servers over here. Let me color coordinate this. I have all these servers over here that are, whatever they're doing. I need the computer, I need GPU to invent whatever I'm inventing in my research and development department. And I got users over here in the research and development department. And you tell them to work on your to work on your stuff, you got to come in to work and sit at your computer, right? No work from home here. And it's hanging off switch 2, that's it. And let's say I want no traffic from VLAN 500 coming across this trunk. I do not want VLAN 500 coming across that trunk. We can configure something called trunk or VLAN pruning. More accurately called trunk pruning, okay? Because VLAN pruning gets into some technology called VTP. It's not on the CCNA exam objectives anymore, but we'll call this trunk pruning. So let's say I only want to allow VLAN 10 and 20 across this trunk. I can come into switch 2. Oops, I did not mean to do that. Stand by. I can come into switch 2, under the trunk interface, and I can hard set what VLANs can come across that trunk. So the command is switchport trunk allowed VLAN, and then I set it 10 and 20. So that is called trunk pruning. And on the opposite side, we could do the same thing, right, on switch 1. Now let's say I wanted to add, so let's say, okay, cool, we're pruning that, but now VLAN 40 is set up, and that's like our voice VLAN, right? We added VoIP phones finally, which again, that's just like standard, but just for whatever, this example. So now we want to add VLAN 40. Well, let me tell you guys something. If I did this, that's not going to work. If I type in this command after this replaces it. So now across that trunk, I'm only adding VLAN 40. That's it. If I wanted to add VLAN 40 in addition to what I already configured up here, 10 and 20, here's how I do it. Add 40. Or I just redo the entire list, okay? Or I just say 10, 20, 40, okay? Just redo the entire list. Those are two different ways, okay, you can do it. But that is VLAN or trunk pruning. That's how we stop that VLAN traffic from across the trunk. Alrighty. Now that we got that out of the way, let's go over DTP, guys. So this is going to be something you have to understand. So the dynamic trunking protocol, DTP, comes in two modes. So when I configure DTP, the dynamic trunking protocol, on an interface, there's two modes. It's called switch port mode dynamic desirable or switch port mode dynamic auto. When I configure dynamic desirable, that means I am propagating DTP messages out and I'm expecting a response to those DTP messages. That's dynamic desirable. If I configure switch port mode dynamic auto, I'm just in receive only mode. I'm waiting to get that negotiation message for that negotiation message to tell me to become a trunk or to not become a trunk, okay? So two modes. There's two modes of DTP, desirable and auto. So let's make our little chart here. So let's say this is switch 1. And hold on, let me lower this. This is switch 1 and switch 2 over here. If I configure switch 1 as desirable and I configure switch 2 as desirable, I will form a trunk. If I configure switch 1 as desirable and switch 2 as auto, I'm going to form a trunk. But if I leave them both at auto, which is like the default setting, I am not going to come up. No trunk, okay? You need to memorize that. You need to understand that. Now, one more thing. This always kind of confuses my students sometimes. 2 ways to configure a trunk. Static, with these commands here, or DTP. And I'll write the commands here. So in DTP, right, it's going to be something similar. Switch 1 config, right? Let me expand this. And the command is switch port mode dynamic desirable or auto. That's the command, okay? And yes, you need to choose the trunking, because if you don't choose the trunking, it's going to default to Cisco ISL in our environments, okay? So you need to also do the other command there, switch port trunk encapsulation .1Q, okay? So let me put that in there as well. Hard set it. You want to hard set it because if you don't, it'll default to using ISL in our lab environments and more than likely on the CCNA exam. I don't know, right, because we can't talk about it, but that's what I would assume if like my EvenG emulation is doing that. Okay, that's how we configure dynamic trunking protocol. Now, what confuses my students? We have 2 ways to do this, static and DTP. The DTP messages, like I've already talked about, are being sent across that link via the native VLAN. So that's like how it gets tagged with the native VLAN. If I configure this static trunk, guess what is still being sent across the wire, but it's not doing anything? DTP. It's really weird. But to turn off negotiation, hard turn it off, meaning DTP messages never come across, you have to do this command here. Switch port, no negotiate. I know you're probably looking at me like, what? Like, what are you talking about? So DTP is being used on static trunks? No, it's not being used. It's not going to be negotiate anything when you do switch port mode trunk. You're hard setting that interface to be a trunk. But for some reason, on the wire, those DTP messages will still come across. I don't know why. It's just the way it's just what it happens, okay? Something you need to know. To turn off negotiation, period, is switch port, no negotiate. All right. Let me now share my screen and let's go over the basic trunking lab, okay? So I'm gonna get in my EvenG topology. Let me stop all these nodes. Close this lab. And let me go to my trunking. I'm gonna do the basic trunking lab, and then you guys in my Zoom call are going to do the advanced trunking lab on your own. Okay, give me a second here to bring this up. So let me secure CRT in to both of these devices. All right. Let me clean this up a little bit. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to side by side these, and let me zoom in a little bit so they can look good. And down here, guys, like Secure CRT is what I recommend everyone uses if they're still using like CLI and stuff. Down here in that box, you can send commands to all sessions at once, okay? Hold on. Stand by when this comes up. And I'm not going to go off the lab objectives. I'm just going to show you how to configure everything I just went over, okay? So let's do it. Get in both these switches. Stand by. That's the thing with emulating real Cisco iOS, right? It can be a pain. Okay, so I'm going to type in enable, conf T. I'm going to give these guys unique host names just so it makes it a little bit cleaner. host name, switch 2. Okay, and let's do it. So first thing I'm going to do is just get my bearings. I'm going to type in do show VLAN brief. No VLANs are created. So let's create VLAN 10, name it the data VLAN, and exit. And then we go back to our network diagram on gig 01. That's where we're going to configure the VLAN. So let's do that first. Let's configure our VLAN first. So it's going to be interface gig 01, switch port mode access, switch port access VLAN 10. All right, so now we got those VLANs created and assigned to that port. Now let's go configure our trunk. What I'm going to do here, guys, I'm going to configure a static trunk. I'm going to show you negotiation still being on, turn off negotiation, configure trunk pruning, default those interfaces, and then do DTP. Just DTP, not going to set encapsulation. We're going to see with our show command and verify our trunking and stuff. So let's do it. So to set up, we're going to go into gig 00. That's the interface connecting our switches. And we're going to type in switch port mode trunk. And we're going to see what happens here. It gives us an error saying command rejected. The encapsulation type is auto, which we can't have. If you want this to be a trunk port, you have to hard set your encapsulation. Again, this is just something unique about our EVE-NG environment that you need to know, okay? So we hard set it, switch port trunk encapsulation.1q, and now we can do switch port mode trunk. Awesome. Let's take a look at our running config here. We can see our static trunk configuration. This is the show command to verify trunks, do show interface trunk. You can see that our mode is on, which means static. You can see our encapsulation type. You can see the native VLAN. That's one thing I'm going to show you too, how to change the native VLAN. And you see VLANs allowed on the trunk. So you may be saying, Johnny, networking guru, you just told us that even this configuration, technically DTP is still going to be online. I wasn't lying to you. I'm going to show you another command here that is good. Put it in your playbook, right? It's going to be switch port, or excuse me, do show interface gig 00 switch port. So check this out. This is going to go over everything that layer 2 device has configured, its modes and everything. So the switch port's enabled. Our administrative and operational mode is trunk. Our encapsulation is .1q. But look at this right here. Negotiation of trunking is still on. But I configured static. Why would DTP still be on? It's crazy, I know, but that's what I was trying to tell you. So to turn off negotiation completely, the command is switch port no negotiate. And if we run that command again, now the negotiation of trunking is off. So there we go. That's what I just wanted to show you guys. So now let's move on. Now let's do some trunk pruning. Let's say I only want to allow VLAN 1 and 10 across. I can do that. And if I type in do show interface trunk, I can see that these are the only VLANs allowed on the trunk. Now let's say I change my mind and I want to do switch port trunk allowed and I want to do VLAN 20. I just royally messed up, right? Because now that I replaced it, only VLAN 20 is allowed. I don't even have VLAN 20 created, so it's not even in our domain. So if I want to then go add VLANs 1 and 10, here's the appropriate way to do it. Switch port trunk allowed, VLAN, add 1 and 10. Or I could have just redone the entire list, right? 1, 10, and 20. Both are okay. Now, if I want to change the native VLAN, this is the command, switch port trunk native VLAN, and I'll do VLAN 20, which again, we need to make. So let's go ahead and make it, exit. And now if we type in do show interface trunk, we see our native VLAN, we see the VLANs allowed across the trunk, and we're good to go. That's static configuration, everything we need to know about trunking and additional configuration, like the trunk pruning, change the native VLAN. Now, let's go ahead and do dynamic trunking protocol. So we're gonna do default interface gig 00. This is gonna completely reset the interface, bring it back to its baseline. So if I type in do show run interface gig 00, nothing there, okay? So now what I'm gonna do is do this, switch port. I'm not gonna set the encapsulation. I'm gonna do switch port mode, dynamic, desirable on both sides. Oh, get back into interface gig 00. And let's do this actually. We'll do switch port mode, dynamic, desirable on switch 1. And on switch 2, we'll do switch port mode dynamic auto, which is like the default, okay? And then we'll come down here and type in do show interface trunk. And let's look here. Look at the different modes between them. And look what it negotiated to, ISL, not the .1Q standard. This is why I say you still have to, you want to hard set it, because sometimes it may go to the one you don't want, which we don't want ISL. Just weird. Do show interface trunk. Okay, give it a second. Came down, now it's coming back up. And now we're still negotiating, but our encapsulation is 802.1Q. Let's go. All right, guys. So now what I want you to do for those in my Zoom chat, let's do the advanced trunking lab, okay? Let's do the advanced trunking lab. And yeah, we'll do the advanced trunking lab. And then since we're getting a little late in the day, that's what we'll probably finish off today. And then I'll send you guys in the group chat what videos to go over the weekend. We'll just do like 2 videos on Saturday, 2 videos on Sunday. And then when we come in Monday, like next week, I'll still stay online while y'all do the advanced trunking lab. But when we come in next week, we're probably just gonna do like probably 5 days straight to make up for the lost time this week. Make sure I get through everything and stop being so long-winded. But anyways, let's go ahead and do the advanced trunking lab, okay? We'll do that on your own. Remember to follow the instructions. And then that'll be it for today's live session, okay? But I'll keep the Zoom bridge up in case you guys have questions. Okay, for those in the live stream, thanks for coming, thanks for viewing. I did 2 streams because I messed up on the last one and muted my mic on accident. So kind of a big mess up there. But next week, we'll be starting again at like around 5:30, probably Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, maybe even Friday. And we're gonna finish up the CCNA training. Now, obviously, I'm not gonna go over everything in the CCNA. That's what the homework is for my students.